You did everything right. The degree, the work, the years of doing what you were told would pay off. And somehow, the room at the top is more crowded than ever. The competition is more brutal, and the door keeps getting further away. That feeling is not your fault, and it is not bad luck. It is the single most reliable warning sign in all of human history. The exact pressure that appeared right before Rome tore itself apart, before France erupted, before nearly every collapse we have a written record of. A scientist has tracked it across 3,000 years, and every time it builds up in large enough numbers, the same thing happens next. The society tears itself apart, not from the bottom, from the top. His name is Peter Turchin, and he did something historians spent centuries avoiding. He tried to turn the rise and fall of civilizations into mathematics, to find the equation underneath the chaos. And when he ran the numbers on Rome, on France, on China, on America, one factor kept surfacing as the hidden engine of collapse. It wasn't invasion, or poverty, or moral decay, the usual suspects. It was something almost no one thinks to blame. It was too many winners. If you have ever felt that the world is more competitive, more bitter, more zero-sum than it used to be, that there are suddenly too many qualified people fighting over too few good spots, then you are not imagining it. You are feeling the exact pressure that has preceded the collapse of every major society that ever kept records. And you are standing much closer to the pattern than you think. To understand what Turchin found, you have to throw out the version of history you were taught, the one made of kings and battles and great speeches. Turchin founded a field he calls cliodynamics. The idea is almost arrogant in its ambition. Take history, the messiest thing humans have, and treat it like a science. Gather data across centuries. Look for patterns that repeat. Build a model that actually predicts. And the model he built rests on three moving parts. Just three. The general population, the elites, and the state. Keep those three in your head, because the entire rise and fall of a civilization is a story of how these three grind against each other. Now, the word elite is where people get this wrong. So let me be precise, because the whole idea collapses if you misunderstand this one word. Turchin does not mean elite as an insult. He does not mean the villains, the greedy, the corrupt. In this theory, elites are simply the people who hold the positions of power a society has to offer, the seats at the top, the political offices, the powerful jobs, the roles that come with authority and status and wealth. Here is the key fact about those seats. There is only ever a limited number of them. A society has room for so many senators, so many governors, so many chief executives, so many people who genuinely run things. That number grows slowly, if at all. But the number of people who want those seats, who are trained for them, who were promised them, that number can explode. And when the number of aspirants racing for the top grows far faster than the number of seats at the top, you get the single most dangerous condition a society can produce. Turchin gave it a name that sounds harmless and is anything but. Elite overproduction. Too many elites. Too many people qualified and hungry for power, and nowhere near enough power to go around. Hold on to that phrase, because in a moment, I am going to show you what it does to a society once it takes hold. And it is far stranger and far more violent than simply a lot of disappointed people. So how does a society end up with too many elites in the first place? This is the part that should unsettle you, because it does not happen through failure. It happens through success. Picture a society in its golden age. Things are going well. The economy grows. There is surplus. There is prosperity. And prosperity does something predictable to families. It lets more of them push their children upward. More people get educated. More people accumulate wealth. More people acquire the credentials and the ambition that qualify them, in their own eyes and on paper, for a seat at the top. This is supposed to be the good news. This is the dream working. A booming society lifting more of its people toward the elite. But remember the brutal arithmetic. The number of actual seats at the top did not grow to match. Prosperity multiplied the aspirants. It did not multiply the positions. So now you have a room built for 10, with 100 qualified people standing outside the door, each one holding a certificate that says they earned the right to be inside. For a while, this looks fine. Competition, we are told, is healthy. But watch what happens as the crowd outside the door keeps growing. First, the competition for each seat becomes savage. When there are far more candidates than positions, the standards required to win climb to insane heights. You need more degrees, more connections, more money spent just to stay in the race. the cost of competing rises and rises, while the odds of winning fall. Second, and this is the mechanism almost everyone misses, the losers do not simply vanish. This is the mistake we make when we imagine competition. We picture the winners taking their seats and the losers quietly accepting defeat and going home. That is not what happens. Not when the losers are talented, educated, ambitious people who did everything right and were promised a place at the top. Turchin has a term for what these people become: counter-elites. A counter-elite is someone with all the training and drive of a leader and no legitimate seat to put it in. And history is brutally clear about what such people do. They do not give up. They turn their considerable talents against the system that shut them out. They build alternative movements. They craft new ideologies that explain why the current order is rotten and must be replaced. They find the frustrated masses below them and they organize them, not out of pure sympathy, but because a frustrated population is the lever a blocked elite uses to force their way in. This is the moment a society becomes genuinely dangerous, when it has manufactured a large class of brilliant, capable, credentialed people whose ambitions have nowhere to go and who now have every reason to want the whole structure torn down and rebuilt with themselves inside it. The political system stops being a place where problems get solved. It becomes a battlefield of rival elite factions, each fighting to capture the shrinking number of seats. Cooperation breaks down. Compromise becomes betrayal. Every disagreement hardens into a war, because underneath the principled language, it is a war over who gets the too few seats at the top. Now, let me show you this actually happening, because Turchin did not invent this in a laboratory. He found it in the ruins. Take the late Roman Republic. For centuries, it was run by a relatively stable elite class. Then Rome's own success flooded it with wealth and conquest, and the number of ambitious men qualified for its limited high offices swelled far beyond what those offices could hold. The result was not polite competition. It was a century of assassinations, civil wars, and strongmen, ending with the republic itself destroyed and replaced by an emperor. Too many elites, too few seats, and a 500-year-old system torn apart from the top. The same fingerprint appears before the French Revolution. A swollen class of educated, ambitious commoners and lesser nobles, trained for positions of influence that a rigid old order refused to give them. Blocked aspirants became the revolutionaries who brought the whole thing down. And Turchin found it in American history too, running like clockwork. He noticed something eerie. Waves of political violence and instability in the United States arrived on a roughly 50-year rhythm. The 1870s, the 1920s, the 1970s, and by his model's prediction made years in advance, the 2020s. Each peak lined up with a period where the country had produced far more elite aspirants than it had elite positions to absorb them. Now stop, because this is the hinge of the whole thing. Everything so far has been history. Rome, France, dusty dates. That distance is about to vanish. Because if the warning sign of collapse is a generation of educated, ambitious people who did everything right and found no room at the top, then you already know exactly what that feels like. You have watched it happen. You may be living inside it. Think about the last few decades. We did something no civilization has ever done at this scale. We told nearly everyone to become an elite. Go to university. Get the degree. Get the advanced degree. Chase the prestigious career. We built an entire culture around the promise that credentials plus effort equals a seat at the top. And hundreds of millions of people believed it and did it. And the seats did not multiply to match. There was no explosion in the number of genuinely powerful, secure, high-status positions. There was only an explosion in the number of people qualified and desperate to fill them. You can feel the results everywhere, once you know the shape of it. Degrees that used to guarantee a career now guarantee only entry into a brutal competition. Jobs that once required a diploma now demand a master's. The credential keeps inflating because the crowd outside the door keeps growing. A generation that followed every instruction perfectly and arrived to find the ladder sawn off above them, and cannot understand why, because no one told them the arithmetic. That confusion, that specific bitterness of the qualified and overlooked, is not a mood. It is not a character flaw in a generation. It is the precise, measurable pressure that Turchin watched precede the unraveling of societies for 3,000 years. The feeling itself is the data point. and notice what it is already doing. Notice how much more zero-sum everything feels. How every institution seems to be turning into a battlefield. How cooperation feels quaint and every argument feels existential. That is what a society sounds like when it has produced too many elites and they have begun, consciously or not, to fight over the seats. So is this a prophecy of doom? Here is where Turchin himself is careful, and where the pattern offers something other than despair. He is not a fortune teller, and he is emphatic that elite overproduction is not a moral failing. Nobody is the villain here. The ambitious young person with 3 degrees and no future is not greedy. The society that educated them was not foolish. Everyone in this story did exactly what they were supposed to do. That is the horror and the strange mercy of it. It is a structural pressure, not a sin, which means it is not about finding the bad people. It is about seeing the machine. And history shows the pressure can be released without catastrophe. Societies that survived their bouts of elite overproduction did it by finding ways to reduce the surplus at the top and ease the pressure below, by rebalancing, deliberately, before the counter-elites tore the structure down. It has been done. It is not common, but it has been done, which means the ending is not written. But it only gets done by the people who can see the pattern in time. And that is the one thing that has changed. Every generation before ours walked into this blind. The Romans had no word for elite overproduction. The French revolutionaries did not know they were a textbook case. They experienced it as chaos, as grievance, as the world simply coming apart for reasons they could not name. You are the first who gets to see the machine while standing inside it. You can look at the bitterness, the gridlock, the sense of too many people clawing at too few doors. And instead of experiencing it as a mystery, you can recognize it as a stage that societies have entered before, and that a rare few have escaped. Every civilization that collapsed was flooded at the end, with brilliant people who had been promised a place at the top and denied one. It happened to Rome. It happened to France. It has happened on schedule again and again to societies that were certain they were different. They could not see it coming. We can. The only question left is whether seeing the pattern is enough to do what almost no one before us managed, to let some of the winners go without a war. Because elite overproduction is only half the story. It is one pressure inside a larger machine, and there is a deeper reason these complex societies become so fragile in the first place. A reason that has nothing to do with elites, or winners, or competition. The thing that builds a civilization turns out to be the very thing that dooms it. That video is on screen now.